We have some good news in Australia. Now, CELPIP is accepted for your Australian immigration, work permit, and study permit. So you're no longer limited to IELTS and PTE. You can go with the easiest exam in the world, which is CELPIP. And in this video, we're going to cover CELPIP Reading, 5 easy tips and tricks that have proven to work time and time again. Don't believe me? Check out our student review right here. 11s and 12s was this student's result, and you can get the same thing by following tips like these. Starting with the first tip that I'm going to mention, and I'm going to cover all 4 parts here, all 4 parts of CELPIP Reading. The first thing I want to mention is when you have, again, this passage on the left, the questions on the right-hand side, what you want to do is read the question, go into the passage, find the place where the answer is, read it, and come back and answer. This is not a tip. This is something you should already know by now if you are a regular follower of HZad Education's CELPIP channel here. But when you do this, what you want to do if you are doing this perfectly is you answer this question, perfect. Now for the next question, you read the next part, you answer that, and move on. And again, it's not necessarily in sequence. It could be anywhere in the passage. But when you answer that, I don't want you to read the same paragraph again when you're looking at question 3 and you're confused. If something about question 3 is relevant to what you have already read, you should remember it. You shouldn't be reading it again. Because if you're finding information for 3, 4, and onward, you should really be looking at other places in the passage, not rereading. If you're one of those people who's rereading the same thing twice, thrice, you're losing time. And the CELPIP time, for example, in part 1, 10 minutes is just not enough. It doesn't allow you to reread. You don't have that luxury. Now, why do you reread? Is because you didn't read it the first time correctly anyway. You were rushing it. Or you were trying to hack it with a secret strategy, like I'll just find some keywords here and get those keywords here and match them. This is not how CELPIP works. IELTS may work like that. In CELPIP, you really have to understand the concept. So the first time you read whatever part of the passage, make sure you read it with clarity and focus, and you try to understand the concept. You should be able to, at the end of reading something, be able to translate or say the same words in your own words. You should be able to explain this paragraph to yourself. If you can, that means you have read it perfectly and you do not need to reread. And that will save you significant amounts of time because that rereading time is not built in with the total time you have in CELPIP reading parts. The next important tip is once again to do with a similar concept, but I'm going to apply that to part 3. So in part 3, it's a little different, right? You have the paragraphs on the left-hand side. You got the questions here. You have to match the questions with the paragraphs. So here, when you start, remember, your time will go slow. And if it is going slow, you're doing the right thing. Do not panic if you feel like you're giving too much time at the start. Here's what I mean. When you start, the strategy is what? The strategy is you read all 9 questions quickly, get the keywords, get the ideas in your mind so you know what you have to hunt for. Because you got to find similar words in the passages. So we know that. Okay, so we're reading the 9 questions. Then we read paragraph A. Then we come back and match paragraph A with whatever it matches, like maybe 5 and 7 are the answers for A. Good. Now I'm going to go to B. Then do the same thing, match, and so on. So what's happening is when I go to B, at this time, I can ignore 5 and 7 because I know for sure 5 and 7 answer paragraph A. So with B, I have lesser choices to look at. Then with C, I have even lesser choices. D, it's going to be super fast, very few choices left. And whatever I could not answer is simply E. So as you go along the paragraphs, your time improves because you have lesser and lesser options to look at. Hence, don't panic if you spend more time at the start. If you are doing that, you're doing the right thing, most likely. Okay, the third strategy has to do with being specific. Let me show you a question here. The problem we get into here is answering something where we think two things are close choices. So I have a question selected for you as a perfect example. Let's see right there. Green architect is primarily characterized by. Now, people get stuck at B or C. These are the common answers. It's 50-50, and people always take one or the other. One of them is correct, one is not. So where's the confusion? I'll show you where the confusion is. Let's see this one, aesthetic ostentation, which by the way means showing off or ostentatious, being ostentatious, pretentious, showing some luxury when it's not really there. Now, why do people answer that is because you see this part here, and this is all about being specific. It says, in the throes of modernity, one might argue architect has undergone a metamorphosis, which means it has gone through transformation, emerging as a field that is as much about aesthetic innovation as it is about sustainable practices. So it's saying it's aesthetic innovation, something that we invent in aesthetics. It's not saying it's ostentation. It's not specifically saying that it's something about bragging or showing off, but because it has the word aesthetic and you have this word here, people think it's the same option and they pick this. You got to be specific. If you pick this answer, you got to show me where it mentions something about showing off, being ostentatious, being pretentious. Hence, that was not the answer. But if you read the following sentence, the burgeoning narrative of Green Architect illustrates a conscientious turn towards environmentally harmonious designs, accentuating, and then it goes on to talk about that. Now, it's talking clearly here about how this turn is getting us towards environmentally harmonious designs, or designs that work with the environment. And there's an option right here, environmental harmony. It's not the same like harmonious, but it's the same concept. And is it specific? Yeah, I can tell you it's right here. This is where it's mentioned, and it's a specific thing. It's not something general or something not relevant to the passage. So all you got to do is, when you have two close options, pick the one that is specific, that you can find in the passage, that is not talking in hyperboles. It's getting to the point. Our fourth tip today is to also see what is important for you to read, because there is just too much information that is mentioned. You want to find things which will be in the questions. And how do you do this? It's pretty simple. Let me give you an example here. So this first sentence, have a look. It's a long sentence. It says, the evolution of green architecture as a discipline owes much to the growing body of environmental sciences. Okay, let me make this simple. So the evolution of green this architecture that we have, basically the environmental architecture, which is benefiting the environment, it's because of the growing body of environmental sciences, because it's saying it owes much to it. So green architecture is basically there because of environmental sciences, okay, which have elucidated the intricate linkages. It's too much, too wordy. You basically need to understand that this has made the links clear, and what links between human activity and climate change. So in simple terms, if I really narrow it down, all of this means the green architect that we have is thanks to environmental science, and it explains basically the link between human activity and climate change. Simple words, I'm going to get rid of elucidate, owes much to. All these extra words are not important, and the questions are never going to ask you, what does elucidated mean? It's never going to ask you that extra information. The questions are going to ask you about the concept. What is the main thing you got after reading that? And if you're just getting that information, you're saving time, avoiding confusion, and answering questions accurately. Our fifth and final tip has to do with this part. You see the second section in part 4, and this also exists in part 1 reading. The second section is always a response section or a comment in part 4. So basically it's a third person coming in now and responding to what was written initially. Here, what I can tell you is, if you even haven't read this, you can pretty much get 80% of the answers correctly. Let me show you. So it says, for example, let's say we don't know anything about this topic, right? Engaging with the complexities of genetic engineering requires a nuanced understanding of its ethical landscape. Initially, I was something, but after careful contemplation, I recognized. So initially he was probably positive. Initially he was happy. Initially he was game for this, but then something changed. That's the tone I got from this part. So this means it has to be something positive. So maybe he was enthusiastic, not ambivalent, like indifferent, didn't care. No. He was overwhelmed. That's negative. No. Optimistic? Yeah. So I would think it could be maybe optimistic or enthusiastic, because the way this is written is positive. So I'm going to keep both in mind. Let me just pick optimistic here and move on. But after careful contemplation, I recognized the involved. So it should be some problem that this person saw. After that, he said or she said, I can't, I'm not that optimistic anymore. So it has to be something negative. What is something negative here? Technological benefits, unintended consequences. That is kind of general. It's not really negative. But then even if you look at the other scientific advancements, controlled experiments, they're both positives, which leaves us with this, which is not super negative, but it is not positive. And we are looking for something negative among the given options. So that would be my answer here. And I can keep going. Just based on the tone, I can answer 80% of these questions. Now you will be in a better place in the exam because you would have read this already. And from that context, you would be answering this part. Same goes for part 4 reading when you have the second section. So here you don't have to really open this up and then look at everything and answer. Open this up, look at everything and answer. If you do that for all the questions, thinking you're being accurate, you're actually not going to have enough time to finish this correctly. Or you might be really perfect with the first 2 questions, but you miss time and don't answer the remaining questions. Here, it's a game of time. Section 2s of parts 1 and 4 reading. You have to do them fast. So the best advice I can give you here, and this is our 5th and final tip, is just like what I was doing here. Answer the questions right away with the tone. Again, you would have read this whole thing at this point. Your tone would be perfect. You would understand exactly what might go in these options. Answer them. And then for some things like question 7, I'm not sure if it's enthusiastic or optimistic. I still got to figure that out. So I would go back there, and then for those specific 1 or 2 questions that are still confusing, I could go up and check what was initially said and get the more accurate answer. But I will not hesitate to first fill up everything, and then later, whatever is confusing, I can go back and check it. That is the best way to manage your time. And again, remember, this is a response. So all of this is new. It's not really highly based on what is said here. It's based on this person's tone and what this person thinks. So your biggest clues are around the given gaps, not quite there. People sometimes think it's there and they waste a lot of time looking back at the original information, but unfortunately, time is one thing you don't have on your side. By using these tips, though, you will be able to manage time, manage accuracy, and get a great CELPIP reading result. I hope this video helped out. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll talk soon. Take care.